continue to have friends join us over the next few minutes, but in the interest of everyone's time, we can go ahead and get started. If you all wouldn't mind joining me after the manner of friends with a moment of shared silence. Thank you so much. Good evening and welcome, friends. My name is Anna Wyeth, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement here at Sidwell Friends. We are thrilled to have so many of you with us tonight. Before we get started, I just want to do a couple of very quick housekeeping items. I want to encourage everybody to change your Zoom name to include your full name and add your connection to the Sidwell Friends community. So for our alumni, maybe it's your class year. For those who are not alums, for an example, if you're a current parent or a parent of an alum, a grandparent, perhaps a current or former faculty or staff member, you can add that in. If you've never changed your name on Zoom, you can do so by hovering over your own name in the participant list. And under that More button, you'll see the option to rename, and then you can add that information in there. You can just think of it like your virtual name tag, and it helps us all see who is here tonight and who's in attendance. We'll ask that everyone keep themselves on mute just to minimize disruptions, and we will save asking questions for a dedicated Q&A portion of the event toward the end. So throughout tonight, if you have questions, please feel free to send them to me, Anna Wyeth, in the chat, and I can share your question with our speakers during the Q&A. Our speakers will not be paying attention to the chat, so if you have a question, please do send it to me and I'll help moderate that process. And now to the reason that we are all here tonight. I'm very, very thrilled to introduce our wonderful speakers. We have a special honor tonight of exploring the world of Nam June Paik, whose work was recently featured in an extraordinary retrospective at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. The exhibition ran for 5 months and just closed this past Sunday, and it will next be on view at the National Gallery Singapore beginning in December. And of course, if you can't make it to Singapore, you can always stop by the Robert L. Smith meeting room at Sidwell Friends School and take a look at the picture, at the very special Nam June Paik work that we have on our campus, of which I am trying to share my screen to show you all a picture very quickly. And this is one of just 2 Nam June Paik works that wonderful Ken Hakuta has shared with educational institutions. So we are among good company in having this on our campus. A mesmerizing riot of sights and sounds, this Nam June Paik exhibition brings together more than 200 works by the visionary artist whose work has bridged art, music, performance, technology in groundbreaking ways, and whose influence is still felt in art, in pop culture, music, and film of today. One of the first truly global transnational artists, Paik foresaw the importance of mass media and new technologies, coining the phrase electronic superhighway in 1974 to predict the future of communication in the internet age. In this exhibition, the artist's first ever West Coast retrospective celebrates his collaborative approach that transcends genres and traditions, while also highlighting the artist's innovative, playful, and profoundly radical work. We have the pleasure and privilege tonight of learning more about the father of video art through the eyes of the Curator of Media Arts at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, Rudolf Frieling, as well as a parent of 3 Sidwell Friends alumni and nephew of the artist and executor of his estate, Ken Hakuta. Nam June inspired his nephew Ken to think of everything backwards, forwards, and sideways, and his experimental spirit certainly made a profound impact on Ken, who became an inventor himself and an entrepreneur. Having started a number of ventures, he became well known as Dr. Fad, the initiator of the Wacky Wall Walker toy craze in the 1980s. And he's been a member of the Sidwell Friends community for nearly 30 years. We are so delighted to have Ken with us tonight to share his experience of growing up with his uncle Nam June Paik. So please join me in welcoming Ken Hakuta.
Nam June Paik was a very intellectual and very funny guy, and just so smart in so many ways. And he wanted to try everything in this world. And he coined terms such as what Anna mentioned, electronic superhighway. Imagine that, when nobody could even think or imagine the superhighway of the electronic superhighway. This was in a Rockefeller Brothers grant application in 1974. But he has also many other interesting quotes. For example, he told me as his young nephew that to have some degree to achieve the American dream, I should aspire to own 2 McDonald's franchises. He was very serious, not 1, but 2 McDonald's franchises. He was very serious about that. But I never really wanted to own a McDonald's franchise, honestly, but maybe a Starbucks franchise, I don't know. And he also, he said things like, I am a poor man from a poor country, he kept saying, which was partly true, because Korea back then was a very poor country. But he didn't exactly come from a really poor family. Otherwise, he would not have been able to study in Japan and in Germany and do all those things. So he probably was not that poor, but that was an exaggeration. He also, he was funny. He also stole some of my ideas. Once I asked him, why is Coca-Cola brown? For some of you who may know, it's sort of a very Fluxes statement. And without attributing it to me, he used that in a catalog for an exhibition. So he even stole ideas from his nephew. Nam June Paik has a special relationship with Sidwell through the robot that Anna showed earlier, that was donated to Sidwell Friends School. There's only 2 institutions that have received Nam June Paik objects: Sidwell Friends School and Harvard University, and that was given in honor of the retirement of Richard Lodish, my very good friend, who I miss very much. As the assistant principal, head of the school, and especially as the head of the lower school. And you put a beard on that robot. Anna, can you show the robot again? If it'll pull up, you'll see that if you put a beard on, which we had at some point, and we can take that artistic freedom to do so, it looks just like Rich. And some of you on this Zoom call, many of you, I'm sure, knew Richard Lodish. And I'm sure, and I'm so glad today that Maya Lodish, his daughter, his only child, is and a wonderful pediatric research doctor, is in the audience, right, Maya? You can't speak because you're on mute, I guess, but I know
I'm Maya, here. I'm driving in San Francisco.
Oh, okay, you're driving in San Francisco. Okay, great. So Maya is on, and so this is. I think the robot looks just like Principal Lodish. That's why it's AKA the Principal Lodish robot. And also I'm glad, just to say, I'm glad that I looked around who was in the audience, and I noticed Linda Kaplan, my good friend Linda Kaplan on there, who I haven't seen for a long time. And I saw Harry Cooper also, who is the curator from the National Gallery of Art. And I also saw Nina Santiago, whose father I knew at the World Bank in Washington, D.C. And I'm sure there are others that I know, which really makes me very pleased that I'm still connected with the Sidwell community. So Rudolf is not just the curator of the, Rudolf Frieling, is not just the curator of the show at SF MOMA, but he is the curator of this entire exhibition with a curator, together with a curator from Tate Modern called Sue Lee. The two of them have curated this show, which has traveled around the world and is next going to Singapore. And we could go there if Singapore would let anybody in, which they are not. So Rudolf.
Okay, my turn. Great. I think it's also my duty to share my screen. So let me try and do that. All right, can you all see this? Mm-hmm. All right, perfect. Well, first of all, I did not change my name for Zoom, but I was thinking I should have written almost friend alum Rudolf Frieling. Our kids in the end didn't end up going to the Friends School in San Francisco, but we as parents loved the school. So I'm really, really pleased to have this opportunity today to speak to all of you. And Anna and Ken, you've already made a great introduction. Here is the picture of our catalog and the touring of the show, which, if you look closely, actually started almost to the day 2 years ago. So obviously the pandemic has extended that run of the show extensively. I'm trying to go through a series of pictures, and Anna, in the interest of time, when I can't stop talking, you just holler and tell me to shut up. All right. One of the mistakes that curators make is they take the knowledge of a famous artist for granted, and what we completely forget is that we all grow older and that there are whole new generations out there in our communities who have actually never heard of an artist, specifically when the work hasn't been on view for such a long time, say 20 years, like the span of a generation. But in our case in particular, when the work or a larger survey of the work had never been on view at all on the West Coast. So it was almost like a no-brainer for our director to think about, to agree immediately to this idea that we would want to do a retrospective almost 15 years after Nam June's passing. And but to tell you a little bit about how these things work in a major museum, I want to first finish my introduction with Nam June, and then I'm going to speak about our relationship to Ken and John Hoffman, both representing Nam June Paik's estate. So in thinking about a picture that could sort of be the sum of so many different things, in introducing Nam June Paik, this is always my best choice. And it's called July 20th, which of course is, well, not of course, but it is Nam June Paik's birthday. And he addressed the fact that this is an important day, of course, not just subjectively or biographically for him, by introducing us to the very almost absurd coincidence that it is the same day he shares with Jacqueline Onassis or Kennedy. He shares that with the day or the night of the moon landing. And even less known, the fact that a German officer, von Stauffenberg, tried to kill Hitler on that day in 1944. And so does all of that make sense? In Nam June Paik's mind, it does. They're all related. Politics, culture, personal biographies between East and West and the history of technology. All of that in a nutshell is within Nam June's mind. And then of course, using that sort of logic by the same token to also make it somewhat funny in turning mathematical equations on their head. So the next picture I want to show you is in the first gallery of our retrospective. But what you're actually looking here is the very first time that I had the pleasure of working with the Paik estate in 2010 or 2011. And the first thing that a curator does coming to a new museum, and I joined SF MOMA in 2006, was to look at what is there in the collection, but also to look at what's not there. And to my surprise, we only had this one work called Egg Rose from the mid 80s. And I made it, my job, obviously, to find an opportunity to show the work. And at that point, when we contacted the estate, I realized, oh, John Hoffman, Paik's former assistant, longtime collaborator, and now curator of the estate, is actually based in San Francisco. That's a nice coincidence. So we got to know each other quite well, and the complexities of something as minimal as Egg Rose are amazing and fantastic. And as a curator, you revel in these opportunities to actually have deep conversations around a single work of art, and that in turn led me to get to know Ken Hakuta. And a few years later, I made it my job to ask Ken, well, could we possibly acquire some works? And that conversation took a few years. And I think around 2015, we were able to make some major acquisitions. And then Ken was so generous that in the end, he gifted so many works that we ended up with a body of 60 works that were all either purchased or gifted to our museum. And that, of course, is a formative move. It's transformative, I would almost say, certainly for our collection. And it was one more reason for us to then say yes to this idea that we should co-organize a retrospective with Tate Modern, and also for me personally to co-curate that with my dear colleague Soo Kyung Lee. One of the things that you always ask yourself is, and I'm going to go to the next one, what is the retrospective going to look like? What do you have to show, and what can you add to this? And one of the things that, of course, is expected is you almost have to show some iconic works. And TV Buddha is arguably one of the most iconic sculptures Nam June Paik has ever done. In fact, it is not just this one. There's a whole series of also later iterations of the same principle, where a obviously silent sculpture is facing its own representation on a TV screen through a closed circuit camera. However, we placed this work in the first gallery to really point to one of our major interests, and that is to explore even more, not just the fact that he is arguably the inventor of a whole genre called video art or media art later. He's also one of the first truly global artists or transnational artists. And this dialogue between East and West, which is definitely so relevant for his own career and his own biography, having moved to Japan, then Germany, then the US. But he also addressed that tirelessly and constantly in his work. And this is one of those iconic moments where, of course, today, people take lots of selfies with that. And they do not meditate quite as much as you would think. But it is still wonderful to see also something like this. And that is just the pleasure of being in the galleries with works, not just seeing things in a catalog and TV Buddha is possibly the most represented picture of Nam June's career in catalogs all over the world, you never ever actually see the front of the Buddha. So here is this quite detailed, quite expressive facial representation of a Buddha almost being shocked by its own television representation, if you will, if you extend that kind of humor of Paik to the reading and the interpretation of the Buddha. So things are, upon closer inspection, actually more complicated than just this idea that here is a still figure confronted with its own electronic representation as a live image. So the Eastern-Western dialogue is also, let's say in a short quip by Paik, is also clear when he said, I'm not a Buddhist, but I'm interested in Zen Buddhism just like I'm interested in Johann Sebastian Bach. And I always liked this comparison because obviously, you know, he was coming out of music, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. But let me first start by showing, you know, one of the smaller works that, however, are so insightful once you think about it. This is the invite to Nam June's very first exhibition in 1963, which happened, by the way, in a small city in Germany, Wuppertal. And it was called initially just Exposition of Music, with a question mark in parentheses. And later on, it was called Exposition of Music - Electronic Television. But what I want to point out here is it is printed on a Korean daily paper, but it is printed in 3 different languages. Obviously, there's English, but then there's also German and French. And then there's, behind all of that is the Korean background. So this layering of languages, which you may not even understand if you don't speak all those languages, is already a really, really early telling sign of his notion of layers, of complexity, of mixing and sampling. And the idea that you could radically change a reading of a work, or in this case, an instrument or a tool, by adding stuff, by letting people perform on it, by making it a participatory work. In more theoretical terms, I could say by opening up the circuits, closed circuits of interpretation and tradition and technological systems. So here we see pianos from his first show, which were prepared, altered. One was destroyed by Joseph Beuys, which you see on the left. And in many ways, it signaled this idea that Nam June made really, really an important artist from the get-go, and that is, he changed the way that we think about music. Music is not something that is just performed on stage or in a concert hall or in a club. Music is something that happens in space. And he figured out how to exhibit and how to think about music as exposed, as he would say, in space. So he said, I stopped performing music, I started exposing music. And this piece, Random Access, is one of the highlights in our show. On the left, you see the historic image from '63, and on the right, you see an installation photo. And this is one of the things we couldn't initially do due to the pandemic. But starting September 1st, we actually let people touch the head of this audio player again, and they run randomly the head along magnetic audio tape on the wall, distributed in this maze, so that they would make music in random fashion. They would perform subjectively, but also they would perform for others what you could call music. Although Nam June, who also made a made a manifesto called Post Music, answered the question, why is it music? Because it is not music. And this kind of opens up a lot of interesting readings for me. So it's very much the idea that you not only change a tradition by shifting it from one space to a completely different space, you also need to change the tools. And he did that by inviting the audience to participate, but he also did that literally by changing instruments or the very idea of instruments. Here you see a cello on the left. This is an installation photo from SF MOMA. And another one of these really remarkable and funny quotes by Nam June is, do not ask what cello can do for you, ask what you can do for cello. So you can reinvent it and give it a contemporary meaning by adding television, but also by adding other instruments to it. In this particular case, we see a TV eyeglass as well as a TV bra. All these instruments and all these tools made Charlotte Moorman, his collaborator, a really famous cellist in the avant-garde scene in New York in the 60s and 70s. And collaborators like Charlotte Moorman, just like John Cage, which I'm sure all Friends alumni love because of the silence that he promoted so well, or Joseph Beuys, we're lifelong friends, and that was another reason why we chose to dedicate entire galleries to these collaborators. And then what I love here is also you see Nam June on the left in a very loose interpretation of what a cello might mean, and a very literal translation of what you, meaning the artist in this case, can do for cello. You can be the body of the cello. And is it going to be music that you're hearing? Well, it is not music, because we are looking at an instrument. So I love these plays around tradition, these reversals, but also the very idea that you do not just make different pictures, you actually transform the way that tools operate. And to make this jump now to the second part of his first show, Electronic Television, here we see another of his famous pieces called Zen for TV. And you already see two different interpretations of the same idea with two different television sets, two different eras. But in each case, you just see a single line of a live television program. And initially, that was actually a glitch. That was a faulty television set that had been delivered to his gallery. And he turned it upside down to make it this long line. And imagine now you would hear live television on the TV set. You would hear the news or a Western, a soundtrack of a Western, in comparison to the very essence of the most minimalist interpretation of what an electronic image might be. Zen for TV is also part of our collection now. But one work that is not part of our collection, and which is one of my favorite pieces of the entire show, is from the Whitney, called Magna TV. And it came shortly after his famous show in Germany in '63, which of course wasn't famous at the time. It just made art history much later on. In the meantime, in '64, Nam June had continued his migration towards the US and had explored further this notion that you can change the hardware of television sets. You can change the hard wiring, so to speak. And one of the simple tools is just add a very, very strong magnet. And it's actually so strong, I want to show you a short video, which I took on my cell phone. So excuse the kind of shaky image, but I just love the way that this is vibrant. So you get a sense of this not just being a still image, an abstraction, an electronic abstraction, but it's full of life. It pulsates. And that's something I really love about his abstractions. Let me see if I can move this on. And here you have two images that also show you the Fluxes side of Nam June Paik. When you look at, let's say, the opposite end of the spectrum, just to give an example, Donald Judd, everything is polished and clean and to 100% formalized. Not so in Nam June's case. He really very often did not care about the imperfections of the form. In fact, he reveled in imperfections. He embraced imperfections, just like he embraced failures, mistakes, glitches. And so you see the two sides, and on the right, you also see a hole in the TV casing, so you could look into the inside of this apparatus. And one funny story here is, as we were installing the work in the galleries remotely, we had a conservator from the Whitney with us on FaceTime and my cell phone. And I asked him, well, should we move the magnet from time to time? Because otherwise the image would burn itself into the screen. I said, yeah, you should, but frankly, you don't have to, because probably somebody in the audience is going to do this for you anyway. You can't keep people away from this. The magnet is so strong, they just have to try this. And it's true. That's exactly what happened, despite the fact that there was a guard almost right next to it. So changing the hardware, but also changing the way that we figure in this equation. Closed circuit, in short, is the idea that you have a live image on a television screen or a monitor or a projection. You know, here you see the camera, and here you see also the latest addition to our collection, TV chair from '68. And on the right, you see a historic image of the artist himself sitting on another version of the same piece from later on. And just imagine for a brief moment what picture would be represented on the monitor if you actually sat down on the chair, which you cannot do in the museum, mind you. Of course not anymore. But say you're a private collector, you could have sat down on this artwork and you would have sat on the image, which I find hilarious in many ways. And sort of the anarchic and radical spirit with which Nam June approached the idea of breaking up closed circuits. And now I jump to another section in the show, which we called Live Feed. And here you also see my, my colleague, Andrea Nietzsche-Krupp, our assistant curator of media arts, who helped me tremendously with the thousands of details in this show. And here she figures as a model in 3-camera participation, which is about abstraction, which is about color, but it is also obviously about the specifics of the electronic image by separating the various colors that constitute the electronic image. And it is this kind of fundamental yet also playful research that Nam June championed, and way before artists today, contemporary artists like Olaf Eliasson and others, have picked up on this again. I also like the fact that it is not just a stage for performers. You can literally also paint with the way that you approach the cameras. And to give you one idea how that works in real life, let me start sharing another screen. Can you see this, Anna? Does it work for you?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is called Participation TV. And again, just think about the separation of colors, but now about the fact that you do not stand in front of a camera, but you actually speak or sing in front of a microphone. Oops. I'm really sorry. That's our San Francisco slow internet connection. Okay, that's embarrassing. I'm so sorry for the center of the technological revolution in the Bay Area not having good Wi-Fi. Okay, I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint. However, I think you've got the idea that it is you physically producing an abstract form in real time, live, and that it is precisely the lungs that you can sustain, the rhythm that you can sustain, that actually makes this this form come alive. And to some extent, this idea of the live and the unpredictable and the uncontrollable is also behind his very first experimental television production from 1970 called Video Commune, Beatles from Beginning to End. And imagine a very experimental public broadcasting, obviously public television, WGBH in Boston, and a 4-hour event. And the event is mostly silent, but the audience back home in their living rooms was asked to choose a Beatles soundtrack, their favorite Beatles soundtracks, to accompany a series of experimental imagery that was mostly produced also with the help of a new tool, a video synthesizer, that Nam June had co-engineered with a Japanese engineer called Shuya Abe. And that is something that we put on our website today, in 21, and we let the online public, sort of the broadcasting through the internet, let them play this back, a shorter recording of this long television production from 1970. And it was very, very popular, I hear. I'm not going to speak too long about TV Garden, which is one of the most successful and also most popular installations in the entire retrospective. People are mesmerized by the very idea that you would look at this immense, expansive environment of some 49 television sets distributed in a tropical garden of live plants, mind you, required watering every morning. And you would see Global Groove, his first video clip from '93, in which you would see, as you see here, John Cage, but also Allen Ginsberg, Charlotte Mormon again, but you would also see a Japanese TV commercial and other stuff that you would normally not see in one television program. And why was that the case? Because why not? Again, why is it music? Because why not? And the message behind that is obviously that Nam June felt, well, it is a Pepsi Cola ad in Japanese, so you would still get the message, right? So we can also might as well show Japanese commercials in this, because we are ultimately about to become a global society. I think in ways he would not have imagined back then, that has become true today. But the next step from that is to think of space not in the literal physical sense in terms of galleries and museums, but to actually think of space as something globally. And the satellite projects he did in the 80s, here is one picture from Good Morning, Mr. Orwell, which aired on January 1st, 1984, and was kind of a rebuttal to the more dystopian George Orwellian vision of our society of surveillance. It showed the potential of collaboration. It showed the potential of mixing high and low, art and music. And I love this one picture so much because I don't think anyone among us can explain why Merce Cunningham, Salvador Dali, and Chairman Mao should be in the same picture, in the same frame. Like, what's that all about? This layering of different narratives, but also this appropriation of different visual cultures is what really made him stand out among his contemporaries, certainly in the 80s, but until his very last day. And this was, of course, a live event between different countries. And this is, believe it or not, I thought it might be a little bit quaint looking at electronic experimentation from the 80s. Again, it's one of the most popular pieces in the entire show. People just love watching these music television shows from the 80s. It also helps for some that you see early computer animation from the 80s. And here is possibly my favorite Nam June Paik quote ever. The first step for a ninja is learn how to shorten distances by shrinking the earth, and for a satellite, that is a piece of cake. Now, I'm still not quite sure what a ninja's job really is and how a ninja operates, but I do know, and I have learned, that this is one way of really bringing into very close dialogue and almost into symbiotic relationship different histories, different cultures, and different cultural legacies, and old traditions like narratives around ninjas and other beings, to make that accessible by addressing technologies of today is really what he did so masterfully. And to explain that a bit more, that was not a piece of cake. This major installation from the German pavilion at the Venice Biennale in 1993, where he was representing Germany by all, surprisingly, next to a US-based German artist called Hans Hake. It was Venice, and he reinterpreted Venice as the site of commerce, historically speaking, as the site of Marco Polo's, let's say, tradition of facilitating commerce between East and West. The site where goods were amassed, riches were amassed. And his argument in 93 was, and it has only become even truer today, we are not living in a society of the exchange of goods anymore, but we exchange images. It has become an immaterial global world. And he did that by literally inventing a 360-degree environment for Venice, which I thought should become visible again. The one major, if not his most complete accomplishment as an artist. I've never seen another space except the Venice Pavilion, the German Pavilion in Venice. And so we made it our job to stage that again, to reenact that again, with the help of John Hoffman from the estate. And here you see how it looks at SF MOMA. And that's, Anna quoted our short abstract of the show, a riot of sight and sounds. It is mesmerizing. It's a 360-degree environment, but it is not seamless. It is not a simulation. It is not one of those commodified commercial enterprises that are touring our country these days and try to sell you immersion, an immersive experience as an artistic experience. I say to everybody, the true Sistine Chapel is this one here, because you understand the spirit of artistic invention, of artistic exploration. And images are thrown all over. They overlap, they interfere, they do not necessarily talk to each other, but most importantly, they also constantly change. And a tool that that is part of this environment is a tool that constantly and randomly switches all 4 video channels so that you literally never ever see the same thing again. So that was a major feature of the retrospective to let this work travel. But then we also did something quite unheard of, and we actually staged just 3 weeks ago on September 17th. We made this little score from 1962 called Do It Yourself become a reality. And the idea that you can play Bach, the left hand in San Francisco and the right hand in Shanghai of the well-tempered clavichord, Fugue number 1, was a mind game in 1962, something that you would never even dream of executing, although that idea of the dream is at the very bottom, was already in Nam June's mind, so to speak. So I thought, taking my inspiration from a ninja, this today is a piece of cake. You know, we can just do this via the internet. We just need a partner in Shanghai, and we found one, and we premiered this on September 17th. Here you actually see Ken Hakuta and John Hoffman in the rehearsal for our performance, where we played Bach simultaneously. It was also the simultaneity that was so challenging because of the latency of the internet. But it is one of those things where you think, this is crazy. Why would anybody who's interested in Bach want to do that? It is not about the perfection, not about the precision that we so love in Bach. No, this is about the imperfection, about the unforeseen due to the connectivity between 2 sides. And you know, how do you even coordinate the left and the right hand in one body? You know, I find that difficult at times. Now here you have to coordinate 2 different bodies, 2 different minds, 2 different locations. And I think, Ken, maybe you can speak to that. Obviously I'm biased, but you were kind of a neutral observer of this concert, how you experienced that.
Oh, it was a wonderful concert that included many of Nam June's aspects. For example, the first part was just silence. You know, nothing happened in Shanghai or in San Francisco, where the concert players were, and the whole idea of playing left hand, right hand. You know, it's just the genesis of all his thinking, of Nam June Paik's thinking, and the fact that, imagine now technologically, this is quite easy to achieve, but even now, because of the speed of the sound traveling, it's very hard to synchronize the piano, left and right hand, playing in Shanghai and one at SF MOMA. So imagine in 1962, how could you have done that? Through an international telephone line? I guess that would be the only way. There were no satellites in those days. So it's just fascinating how Nam June Paik could imagine a piece like this before it could be done technologically. That was my observation, Rudolf.
Well, I'm really at the end of my talk. And I think, in the true spirit of 2-way communication and open circuits, let the questions come in.
Sure. Well, we've had a couple come in through the chat, and I would welcome anyone, if you have questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free to share them in the chat with me. One of the first questions, which was a little logistical, was about the television Buddha and a curiosity of whether Nam June Paik had been the sculptor of the Buddha, or if that was another sculpture that was just brought in.
No, I'm not positive about this one example, but very often he would just go to Chinatown and pick something up, or an antique shop, obviously. One of the works that I have not shown, also a recent acquisition, is called Camel Saddle, one of his last works he ever completed. And it features an antique Mongolian camel saddle which he then painted on, and he placed 2 television monitors on top of it, just displaying a clip from with Allen Ginsberg. So he would, appropriation was really key to his practice, but whatever item he took, whatever tool he changed, he would always change it according to his parameters. He would, and I have not, and excuse, sorry for that. I have not talked about drawings. I have not talked about other sculptures that obviously constituted the retrospective. I have really featured on the media aspect here because it was really, it's the most striking aspect of the retrospective. But he would constantly draw throughout his entire life. And in many ways, I think he was very much about the ideas. Take a Buddha, take a camera, take a monitor, and you have TV Buddha. A Buddha could also be Rodin, the thinker, or could be a dog, or it could be many other things.
Sorry, of course, I couldn't find my mute button for a second there. Thank you. We had another question. This person said, I'm curious how the audience response was in San Francisco, and specifically responding to the resonance now in our hyper technological era, and especially maybe in San Francisco.
That was also our question, how would a public in 21 or 2020 respond to this? And I have to say that throughout all walks of life, almost, from critics to artists, to curators, to the general public, the response has been phenomenally positive. And I had not anticipated that to that extent. And one of the reasons is that that you learn from Nam June Paik not by looking at the specifics of the technology. For example, there is an old, there's the tool actually exhibited in the show, the video synthesizer, or a part of that they invented in 1970s. And today it looks like a clunky, huge machine. And basically we do the same, we perform the same functions on our cell phones almost, or through software on our computers. And that's not the point. The point is actually that his approaches and his irreverent approaches to tools, to image making, to drawing, to sculpting, to performing, to everything he did, are so relevant still today. And what is maybe most relevant is that he did that as a global artist who was trying to overcome borders, not just in the geographical sense, also in the sense of taking down walls between practices, between genres. And I have given a whole class or a whole lecture for music students at UC Berkeley, for example, who study his symphonies. The director of the San Francisco Symphony came to see the show. There is an intense interest in his way of rethinking and repracticing a sort of radical kind of music. And of course, the last example I showed, the Sistine Chapel, when you look at even walking downtown San Francisco, you come across commercial lobbies in the financial district, and you see massive electronic displays. But what they do is they show you the scale, impressive. They show you what technology can do these days, but the content is just eye candy. It's just superficial, commercial eye candy. And that's where Nam June really shakes you and wakes you up. It is nothing that you can easily digest. At the same time, it transmits this enormous positive energy. And that, I think, is something people respond to extremely well.
I think this next question, you spoke a little bit about this in your answer just now, but the question is really for both of you. His work was so forward thinking. What do you speculate that he would focus on, focus his creative energies on if he were still producing today?
Ken, you can speculate much better than I.
Well, not really. He was interested, Nam June Paik was interested in everything. He read, Chinese philosophy books, Chinese poetry, German engineering magazines, everything, Italian publications. He read popular electronics. He read TV Guide. He was interested in everything. Now, with today's technology, would he be in TikTok? I have no idea. I really don't know,
I think he would, frankly.
Yeah.
He would have started, YouTube was founded in 2005 and Nam June passed away early 2006. So there was really no overlap at all. So we don't really know. But obviously it was his dream of multiplying TV channels. In 1973, as the intro to to Global Groove, he would dream of a TV landscape where the program guide would be as fat as the Manhattan phone book.
Right, where everybody has their own TV station.
Exactly.
There we go, their own channel. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he might have been an influencer of sorts.
I would say, though, that he did not necessarily become a digital artist. He did not quite as much enjoy the idea of programming, of sort of logical languages that you needed to apply in order to achieve some result. And that was also pre-planned. He much more enjoyed the fluid approach of analog technologies.
Thank you. This question is a little bit more about your work, Rudolf, but what challenges do curators face in conserving his work? Technology evolves, parts of television stop being made, videotapes wear out. How do you guys keep it all functioning?
That's probably another Zoom conference, I would say. It's a really complex topic. But Ken, this is also news for you. I am super proud that I can say the show, which was almost 5 months, ran without a single breakdown of a single monitor or piece of equipment or projector for that sort. So that's unheard of almost. So it's the good spirit, of Nam June hovering above us and making sure that things were working in the end.
Yes,
But of course, we know every system breaks down at some point. Every piece of technology breaks down at some point. And you have to be prepared. And I'm also really happy that Ken had the foresight to not only gift us many of Nam June's work, but also to give us an endowment which would help us to preserve Nam June's work in perpetuity. And that at times simply means that we produce what we would call an exhibition copy. And that is the most, let's say, the simplest way of making sure that one piece of equipment doesn't get overexposed. As we have taken our clues from Nam June Paik's own practice, in which he would constantly remake his earlier works through new technology, it is fair to say that gives us license to also produce an exhibition copy that we try to match as closely as possible to the aesthetics of the original. But if there is a difference, that doesn't matter. It may matter to my curatorial sort of sense of authenticity, but for Nam June Paik, for the artist himself, I think the difference was fine. He would enjoy, he would embrace differences in that. So that said, of course, sometimes you really deal with complex matters, and we also need to have a relationship with experts in the field who can repair a television set, for example. It does take a specialized team of collaborators in the museum, in our conservation department. It does take a specialized media conservator to really properly take care of a complex collection. And in many ways, the museum becomes the prime location for you to experience this type of work, because obviously, where would you see today a TV box? Like, that's by all means cannot compete anymore with the just visual splendor of a gigantic flat screen on our walls. So I think what is important to keep in mind, first of all, that my battery is running low here. I have to connect this soon. But also that the works should not become about the technologies in the end, where you encounter work and they say, oh, this is so charming. I used to play with that when I was a kid. I used to watch on this kind of television my programs. No, it should still be about the ideas. And when it takes a new technology, a new piece of equipment to make that still become alive, then so be it. So we have learned to become flexible, to respond to the needs, and to really take our cues from the artist himself. So now, excuse me, I'm going to change I'm just going to sit down in a more comfortable seat so I can connect my power.
Well, Ken, I have a question that's really directed to you. This question was that this person would be interested to hear about how you became the executor of the estate and really your relationship with this, publicly iconic artist who was obviously your family member, but just a bit more about the behind the scenes of how that came to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, I cannot appoint myself the executor. Nam June Paik has to do that in his will, which he did. But we had discussed that while he was alive, of what would happen, and he, it's very strange. Many people in our family really thought he was a little nuts, and but ever since I was a child, I was one of the few people who, it's not that I understood his art, but I kind of accepted it. And for some reason, I hung around him, ever since I was born. And we both came to New York in 1964, in the same year when there was a great migration of artists from Europe to New York. Nam June Paik came from Germany to New York. And so our path crossed so many times, and he was my guardian. Think of it, a Fluxes artist as your legal guardian. That's quite, to many people, that's kind of a terrifying thought. But that's what he was, and he took care of me, and we discussed all this, and so he appointed me as the executor of everything related to his arts, and that's what I've been doing. And let me tell you, being some people may think it must be one, fun, or two, glamorous to be the executor of a well-known artist. The answer is no. It is the how can I put it? It is a big pain in the butt. I must say that. I have my own nice life.
Oh, Ken, come on. We had so much fun doing this.
Obviously I do, which is why I'm doing this. Well, I'm doing it as when I started this, as some museum directors said, well, Ken, you have to do this, I was encouraged to do it. No, but Rudolf, dealing with you and Suk-Young Lee at Tate Modern, I mean, these are the joys, and having, the show at SF MOMA, all these things are great joys, but behind the scenes, to get to that point, we have to put up, as the executor, so much garbage from so many different parties. It is unbelievable. And that is, it's something I really dislike. And those things aren't going to go away. And it's interesting. You cannot change things in art. I guess art history passes very slowly, right, Rudolf? It moves very slowly, and it takes decades. Just this Tate Modern SF MOMA show took, what is it, Rudolf, 8 years in planning?
Well, I wouldn't say the show itself took that long, but our correspondence, our meetings about the acquisitions, also the Tate acquired, a body of work, all of these conversations that gradually led to this point where he said, let's do a show out of this. All of that was 8 years in the making.
Yeah, well, if you include Tate's acquisition, you're talking 10 years,
Yeah, yes.
If not more. I first met Suk-Young Lee in New York, I think in 2009, maybe. So well, it takes a very long time, and sometimes John Hoffman, who's the executive assistant of the estate and longtime collaborator and assistant to Nam June Paik, as sometimes we say, well, we cannot change things. We almost have to wait for the bad guys to die. It's a horrible thing to say, but that's what it is. And I'm sure there are people who want to do things differently from us, who are saying the same things about us.
And let me add my 2 cents to the question. I think Nam June saw in you what has become true, which is you are a really good businessman. You take care of things in the appropriate way. And I don't think Nam June Paik could have had a better executor than his nephew, who hung around, who loved him, but who's also, not maybe savvy in finances, and that really helps to cement a legacy in some ways. Making sure that the right museums show the work, making sure that they have the tools at hand to show the work in the best way, and I don't think we could have had a better partner in you. So thanks to let's hope for a long friendship. Let's say at the end of Casablanca, we walk off into the distance. Let the Zoom call be over soon now, and let's go and have a drink.
Well, thank you, Rudolf. And I will, not to let Nam June down, I will still strive to somehow own 2 McDonald's franchises.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on. I want to say thank you very, very much to the both of you for your time, for sharing so generously of your knowledge and insight. And this has been a fabulous opportunity for us to be able to see so many works of his, as well as hear directly from the 2 of you. We really appreciate you for being here. And thank you. Oh, sorry. I just was going to say thanks as well to all of our audience members for being here tonight, for being here in community with us. These events are nothing without the folks who come and participate. So we are so grateful to all of you for spending your evening with us here tonight. These are really, truly special opportunities by being part of the Sidwell Friends community that we get the chance to hear from people like these 2. So thank you again. Thank you both. And we'll see you all very soon.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Anna. Thanks, Ken. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Rudolf. Thank you very much, Rudolf.